You're listening to the Cyberwire Network, powered by N2K.
Commerce, labor, state, defense, energy, critical infrastructure, etc. All of that would be wide open for any adversary to look at.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CyberWire's Hacking Humans podcast, where each week we look behind the social engineering scams, the phishing schemes, and criminal exploits that are making headlines and taking a heavy toll on organizations around the world. I'm Dave Bittner from the CyberWire, and joining me is Joe Kerrigan from the Johns Hopkins University Information Security Institute. Hello, Joe.
Hi, Dave.
Got some good stories to share this week, and later in the show, my conversation with Pete Ford. He's Senior Vice President of Federal Operations at Q-Secure. We're talking about the implications of quantum computing.
The start of the year is a great time to take that next step in your education, career, and beyond. Rely on N2K Certification Prep to provide the tools to help boost knowledge, skills, and confidence to get you there. And now, for a limited time, all N2K certification practice tests are 40% off. Visit n2k.com/certify and use promo code N2KVDAY. That's N2KVDAY to save 40% on your purchase. That's n2k.com/certify with promo code N2KVDAY. Offer ends Monday, February 19th. Happy learning.
All right, Joe, before we dig into our stories this week, we have a bit of follow-up here. You want to take us through what our listeners have sent in for us?
Well, before we get to what the listeners have sent in, I have two pieces of information. Number one is there has been an arrest in what is believed to be the Rockstar and Uber hacks.
Okay.
There's not a lot of information coming out about the arrest because the person is a minor. But the British police have picked up somebody.
Right.
And we have a link. We'll put a link in the show notes. There's an article on Bleeping Computer that discusses it.
Okay.
Another thing is the week before we recorded this episode, Hurricane Ian moved through Florida and did a significant amount of damage to a couple of areas down there, Fort Myers being one of them. What's going to happen right now is there's going to be scams around this, Dave. Mm-hmm. It's going to happen. So just be mindful of it. I just want to advise people that listen to this show. They know that most of our listeners these guys watch the news cycles. They're going to do this. Right. And finally, we did get a Dustin writing in, a letter from Dustin, who writes in with information from our listener last week, coincidentally also named Dustin, which is interesting. I had to look and see if these were the same people. They are not.
Okay.
So they're just two guys named Dustin. And Dustin writes, listening to your most recent episode now, I'm a registered health information management technician working for a children's facility in the medical records department. I can say that the person who wrote in about their pediatrician's office and obtaining medical records, that he should have been made to produce ID to pick up in person in that way. So he should have been asked for his ID. Mm-hmm. Furthermore, the pediatrician's office should have submitted a continuation of care release of information request, and those records should have been sent directly to the pediatrician without involving the patient/parent or anything other than perhaps a signed authorization. So there is infrastructure that allows that to happen, apparently.
Right.
That was one of my questions. As far as faxing in healthcare, it is still the best way to get documents that are time-sensitive, communicated, and sent between medical facilities. Most now use some sort of faxing software integration that works similar to email, but when you are taking those provider offices that are outliers, those that are out in the far-reaching corners of the countryside, fax may still be their best or only option. Well, that's a good point. Infrastructure is not the same. We have the luxury of living in one of the more developed parts of the country, Dave.
Yeah.
But I frequently travel to the less developed parts, out in Appalachia. It's an excellent point. Believe me, all of us in healthcare want to get rid of faxing personal health information, PHI, but I'm afraid the technology is not currently available to all healthcare entities to provide instant communication and the transfer of information. A big part of this is a thing called interoperability, and trying to get every healthcare entity on a page where they all are okay with sharing information back and forth has proven hard to do given the fact that a lot of healthcare entities are also a for-profit business and interoperability is not a friendly word to profit seekers.
Ah, yeah, right.
So thank you, Dustin, for writing that in. I will agree with that, but there are other ways we could go about doing this. I remember, I haven't used this system in a long time, but we used to have a secure way of delivering documents to our customers via an encrypted website. You know, the files would be stored securely and somebody else could go and get them, and we'd provide a link and then information via another medium.
Well, I've noticed, like with most of my healthcare providers now, they have some sort of portal that you go to.
Yes.
And they seem to be quite secure. There's usually, in fact, I think all of them have some type of multi-factor authentication built in. And, but that way, instead of emailing stuff back and forth, they can post things to the portal, and you can go to the portal and they can share things. So I've seen test results and notes from my doctor and things like that. So that seems to work pretty well.
The product I've seen is called MyCharts, and I've seen this at multiple places, and I think that's an Epic product that integrates directly with the electronic health record system.
Okay.
So you're actually looking at the patient view of the database through that website, which is great.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I'm happy that we're moving in that direction.
Yeah. But Dustin makes a good point. You know, not every small office like out in West Virginia is not going to have an EHR system.
Right.
They're not going to do it because they might not be making that much money. And I'll tell you, Epic is not cheap.
Yeah.
It's very expensive.
No, and I think the point also that if you're running a for-profit business, you want to have gatekeeping leads to dollars, right?
Yeah, right.
So if you can charge somebody for access to something, then you have an incentive to do that, whether or not it's ultimately in the patient's best interest or not. But
or even ethical.
That's a conversation for another day.
Right.
All right. Well, our thanks to Dustin for writing in. We do appreciate your expert insights. One other quick little note here we got from someone on Twitter whose Twitter handle is @ToddySM, and says, about your catch of the day. So last week we had a catch of the day where the person purported to be someone named Vladimir Petrova.
Right.
And Toddy SM writes in and says, about your catch of the day, Vladimir is normally a male name, while all names that end with A are normally female surnames. In addition to the bad English, I doubt that Vladimir Petrova is a combination you will ever see in a real name.
So Petrova is a female name is what he's saying.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. So there you go. But, that's the kind of thing where unless you're a native speaker or someone familiar with that language, that could easily slip by, which it did for us.
I wouldn't have recognized it. I'll bet Petrova is the female version of Peter in Russian. And that's just a guess based on the my hobby-like love of linguistics.
Okay.
I guess.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for sending in your thoughtful feedback here. Of course, we'd love to hear from you. Our email address is hackinghumans@thecyberwire.com. All right, Joe, let's jump into our stories here. I'm going to kick things off for us. Kind of a quick one here from me this week. This is from John Brodkin over at Ars Technica. And this is about the FCC advancing a plan to require blocking of spam texts from bogus numbers.
Okay.
In the what the hell is taking you so long department, we have, so there are a couple interesting things here. So the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, they have released a plan that requires mobile carriers to block a wide range of illegal text messages. So this is a notice of proposed rulemaking. Basically, the FCC is putting the word out to the public that this is something that they're planning on doing. There's a comment period.
I was about to say, is there a comment period?
There's a 30-day comment period and then another 15 days for replies to comments. After that, the FCC can draft new requirements and then they'll set up a final vote, blah, 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 blah.
I'm going to go comment on this, Dave.
Okay.
My comment is going to be, what the hell is taking you so long?
Yeah. So, but there's an interesting little side note to that as well. So basically what they're saying is that wireless providers will be required to block texts at the network level that are from invalid, unallocated, or unused numbers and numbers on the do not originate list. I didn't know there was a do not originate list.
I have to find out what that list is. That's a new one to me.
Do not call list, but I didn't know there was a do not. I guess it's like a block list for or the origin of numbers, which is interesting. They talk about how rightfully so the American people are fed up with scam texts. That's from FCC Chairwoman Jessica Rosenworcel. So I think this is good news. Sort of a side note that we've alluded to is that this has been on the FCC's docket for quite a while. And this article points out that the timing is interesting in that there were lots of other things that the FCC was working on that were also similar types of things, and that got addressed. And this just kept sort of being on the back burner.
Really?
Yeah. But then, according to a report from Axios, the vote finally happened after a reporter started asking around why it was taking so long.
Good.
Yeah.
Media doing its job.
Right. Well, that's a really good point.
Right.
That's why, and as you and I have talked about, we've seen this hollowing out, particularly of local media.
Absolutely.
Is problematic because you don't have people asking these questions. What's taking you so long?
Right.
So evidently, once this reporter started poking around, the folks on the FCC commission voted. They voted 4-0, bipartisan, to say, yes, this needs to be taken care of.
Good.
So that's interesting, good stuff. So, it looks like we are a month and a half, maybe 2 months away from actually seeing some action on this.
I hope so.
It'd be interesting to see to what degree it actually makes a difference and how the text spammers pivot and come at it in any
they're not
going to
take this line down. They're going to do something else.
Yeah.
They're going to find some way to get around this. Hopefully this will make it much more difficult for them, and maybe there will be costs involved for them.
Right.
I think if you can impose costs on these guys, higher costs, that stops it.
Yeah.
You can just make it so that they have to pay lots of money to send these kind of texts.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It pretty much ends it.
Yeah. This article points out that robocalls are still a bigger problem in terms of the complaints that the FCC gets, but text messages, I think, are number 2 in terms of things people contact the FCC and have a headache about.
Yeah,
so,
I would like the ability to block political robocalls and texts. And there's a big First Amendment issue there.
Yeah.
Because people do have the right to express their opinions and all that stuff. Freedom of speech is very important to me. But this is my platform that I pay for. Mm-hmm. This is not your platform. You don't get to send me whatever you want and invade my space that I pay for with this. I think there's some limit here. I don't want to hear from anybody on my phone about an upcoming election.
Yeah.
Right.
I'll share. It's funny. My co-host Ben Yellen from the Caveat podcast was recently put out a similar complaint on Twitter that he was really tired of all of the political messaging that he was getting, and I shared a bit of advice that I think I've shared here before as well. A friend of the show, Ray Redacted on Twitter, gave me the tip once to make a folder in your email account that anything that contains the word unsubscribe goes into that folder for later review. And boy, does it clean out your inbox. It
is
unclutters.
A great idea.
Yeah, I mean, you still got to check it every now and then, just like you got to check your spam folder.
Well,
but it just unclutters your mailbox in a very, very satisfying way.
I will tell you that I might change my current policy, because right now what happens is all of my email goes to that folder unless it comes from someone I've sent an email to or someone I've put on a list. So, but I have been missing emails from people, and I have to go into that other folder at least once a day to find them.
Right.
And it's a lot of work to do that.
I know. Email's just a pain these days.
It is.
I wish. It's a shame that email hasn't evolved more than it has for many, many reasons.
It is. It's time for email to change, and maybe I'm going to do something.
Be the change, Joe.
Maybe I will
be the change.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's my story this week. What do you have for us, Joe?
Dave, my story comes from Vicky Hopes, who writes for the Abbotsford News. Ever been to Abbotsford?
No.
It's in British Columbia, north of the border.
Okay.
So
nope.
It makes sense. But the headline is 2 Abbotsford residents lose $46,000 in bank scam. And police warn others to be cautious of clicking links on mobile devices.
Okay.
So here is how this story unfolds. And I have some questions, actually. And I don't know if Vicky Hopes is technical, but this article does raise a couple questions. But she says 2 victims have fallen for this bank scam, according to Constable Art Steele. I love the term constable. We don't have enough constables in the United States.
Also, Art Steele is a
Art
great name.
Steele, yes.
Sounds like someone in a murder mystery novel or something.
It does. But he's with the Abbotsford Police Department and said that what happened was 2 people got texts that contained links that installed malware on their phones or mobile devices, he says, that then provided username and passwords for their bank account. So I don't know. That's the part that makes me go, because it doesn't line up with the rest of the story.
Okay.
Because what happens then is the fraudsters would call the victims by phone, usually very early in the morning, claiming to be employees of the bank, and they would ask if the person had made a recent purchase of gift cards.
No.
Right? Right? Of course, the person would be like, no, I didn't do that. And they'd be like, okay, so we got some fraudulent activity here. Let's get the ball rolling on getting this done. And of course, in order to get the ball rolling on resolving fraudulent activity of purchasing gift cards, I need you to go out and buy some MasterCard gift cards.
Oh, is that right?
And then provide the information to me, the security codes on them, to make sure everything's good. Additionally, these people were then asked to take their money, large quantities of money out and go to a Bitcoin ATM. And send money to send Bitcoin to these scammers.
Wow.
So any money sent to them via Bitcoin is gone. There's no hope of getting that back.
Right.
That's unless they can actually catch the scammers and get their private keys. There is a way to get it back, but probably not going to happen.
Sure.
But here's my question about this thing. I don't know if you had taken someone's username and password into a bank account. Why would you need to call them and do some kind of fraudulent activity? Why wouldn't you just go in and send yourself a big check? Also, how did these guys get this malicious software installed on people's phones? Was it something in one of the Google Play Store or probably the Google Play Store, probably not the Apple, maybe the Apple, who knows?
Yeah.
The Apple, what's the Apple store called?
The App Store.
Oh, the App Store.
Yeah.
App Store, right? Apple App Store.
Yeah.
Got it. So it's much more likely that these malicious apps exist in one of these stores, and maybe they don't send credentials, but they send information about banking transactions that have happened. Or maybe they do send the credentials, and that's how these guys get in there, but then they can't transfer any money because I don't know how this works.
As you were describing it, I was wondering, like, if I called someone, if I were doing this scam,
right,
I would call them in the morning, right? So
right.
they're bleary-eyed and half awake, and say, "Hi, I'm from the bank. I'm here to help. There's been some fraudulent activity. I'm going to send you a link to log into your bank account."
Right.
Right? And then I would send them the link, which of course is a phishing link, and it's going to go to a web page that looks like the bank.
Right.
And then they're going to log in with their username and password. Now I've got their credentials, and I'm off to the races.
Right.
That's what I would do. Is that not what's going on here?
No, what's going on is they're actually telling these people about transactions they've seen on the bank account.
Okay.
So that's how they're getting trust from the people.
Right.
To show them that they are from the bank, when in fact they're not. They've just gone in and they've gotten this information. I don't know how they've gotten this information. Maybe they're using the credentials to log in and then looking at it. But if you've done that, why not just fraudulently transfer the money? Maybe maybe there are ways to detect that.
Yeah, it could also be that if you can get the person who owns the bank account to withdraw the money,
right,
then the bank's not going to claw back the money,
right,
because that person was authorized to transfer that money.
That's probably
words,
a good point.
The bank didn't do anything wrong.
Right. This person went to the bank and withdrew the money and then bought Bitcoin with it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the bank's not, if you went in and just transferred the money to your bank account, first of all, that points to your bank account, and also possibility for clawing it back. So that could be a reason.
Yeah, I think that's actually good analysis.
Yeah.
Probably right. Probably correct. So, okay, so maybe it is, but I'd still like to know how they got this malicious app installed. Why is it in the App Store? Right. I doubt they got these guys to sideload it from some third-party marketplace, right? I mean, how do you do that with a text message? Unless the people have already got the developer options enabled. Maybe that's the case. These are questions I have for the...
I mean, if you send someone a link, I'm just thinking, on Planet Apple, where I live, right. Someone could send you a link that would take you to an app on the App Store.
Sure.
And then they'd say, okay, I'm going to take you to our security app, and when you see the install button, just hit install, and there you go.
Right. But that has to be a malicious app that's in the App Store.
Right. That's an excellent point. Yeah. And so, how do you do that?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, trust me, the app says that it's Panda Pop, but it's actually our bank security.
Right.
It's actually our bank security. We're just doing this to stay one step ahead of the scammers.
Yeah, again, the problem is that a lot of the technology is a mystery to most people using it, right? It's not clear how this thing works. All that's clear is that you have a screen in front of you. If you push in this location, then if you interact in X way, then Y happens.
Right.
So it all stems from that.
I think about I certainly have family members who interact with their electronic devices in that way. They know what to do, but they don't know why or what it's really doing. They just know this is the order of operations of things I have to press in order to do the things I want to do. And that's tough because it makes them more likely to be able to be manipulated in this sort of way.
Yeah.
All right, interesting story. We will have a link to all of our stories in the show notes. Joe, it's time to move on to our catch of the day.
Dave, our catch of the day comes from Joseph. A lot of name pairing going on in today's episode. Got 2 Dustins and 2 Joes.
Yeah.
But Joseph writes, I was surprised this made it through my spam filter. I think it's because they CC'd no reply at paypal.com. And as I'm writing this, I just checked, and it's actually PayPal at no-reply.com.
Oh.
Those scammers, he says.
Okay.
It would be interesting to register the domain name no-reply.com.
Yeah. Well, remember there's that whole story about the guy who owned don'treply.com?
Yeah.
And the stuff he got?
Got tons of stuff.
Classified documents.
Yeah,
all kinds of stuff.
That's a completely different... I could go on for days about that. They had some convincing parts to this and obviously put some thought and work into it, but then they did weird things like leaving out a subject and adding a random string of numbers in the body of the email. Dave, why don't you take it away and read this message that looks like it came from PayPal, but did not.
All right. It says, Dear customer, your order has been placed, and here's the order number. Thank you for shopping with PayPal account. Your order has been successfully registered with us. You'll get your shipping as we get confirmation of payment from PayPal. Please keep this receipt number for future reference. You'll need it if you contact customer service at PayPal. You have 24 hours from the date of the transaction to open a dispute. For assistance, call this number. Please don't reply to this email. It'll just confuse the computer that sent it, and you won't get a response. Okay.
So I think the random string of numbers that Joseph is referencing here looks kind of like a Bitcoin address, but I don't know that it's a Bitcoin address. Doesn't. Maybe it is. Maybe not. I don't know. Yeah. Unfortunately, what Joseph sent was a picture, so I can't copy and paste the text. I could go and manually enter it, but I'm not doing that. I love that. This is a typical scam. What's going to happen here is you're going to call this number, and these guys are going to be like, well, there's going to be some fake tech support guy on the other end, and he's going to try to take over your computer and try to get you to send either Bitcoin or money to them, or just take all the money out of your account.
Right.
Maybe get access to your PayPal account.
Exactly.
Start draining your bank accounts.
Yeah, absolutely.
So don't reply to any of these. Never call the number. Look up the PayPal number. Also, by the way, that's the way to defend yourself against the story that I had as well. When somebody calls you from the bank, tell them, hang up and call them back. Call the bank back.
All right. Well, our thanks to Joseph for sending that in. And again, we would love to hear from you. If you have something you'd like us to consider for the show, you can email us. It's hackinghumans@thecyberwire.com. Joe, I recently had the pleasure of speaking with Pete Ford. He is the Senior Vice President of Federal Operations at a company called Q-Secure. And our conversation is about the implications of the coming wave of quantum computing. Here's my conversation with Pete Ford.
I would relate it to where do we stand with Y2K back in 93 when Peter DeJager wrote, "This is a big problem and it's 2,308 days away." So we knew that because we knew that January 1st, 2000 was upon us. In our world of quantum right now, particularly quantum communication and quantum computing, that date isn't fully defined, but we can measure how fast things are going based on the technology that we see coming out, the results we see coming out, and the level of effort, not just with individual commercial entities, but with governments. So most people consider that a quantum computer that can break our classical encryption is 4,099 coherent qubits, is sometime between 3 years from now and 7 years from now.
You know, for folks who are kind of going through their day-to-day lives and depending on the various types of encryption that we've all become accustomed to, whether using our banking apps and, secure web browsers, all that sort of thing, to what degree will this affect them? How much concern should they have?
They should be pretty concerned in that all of our public key infrastructure is built around asymmetric keys. And those asymmetric keys have PSRK, the pseudo-random keys that are non-polynomial hard math protecting them. So a classical computer can't break those, but the quantum computer that we're concerned with can, and it can break them really fast. So all the information that's protected, and right now well protected by our PSRK and public key infrastructure, won't be protected when that quantum relevant computer comes out. So anything that's stored or stolen or hacked right now that can be decrypted later is exactly what we need to be concerned with. And those are things like your mortgages, our bank accounts, all of our private information. And on the federal side, what I'm really concerned with, that also means a lot of things that we consider nation state importance: commerce, labor, state, defense, energy, critical infrastructure, et cetera. All of that will be wide open for any adversary to look at.
And where are we on the journey to making our encryption routines quantum safe?
Well, like anything, we're a little on our heels, but we're catching up fast. Some of the most important pieces really happened this year. I like most of IEEE and several other high-end organizations consider the quantum decade to have started in 2020. And in May of 2021, we had some executive orders that come out and said, we really need this to go faster. We need to get rid of legacy encryption data, metadata that we're holding on to that's already outdated, and we need a modernization plan. And then this year, in 2022, on 19 January and again on 5 May, two executive orders came out. They're called National Security Memorandum. Memorandum 8 was January, and Memorandum 10 was in May. They came out and classified, and we have the unclassified version. And the neat part about those was, aside from reinforcing what we saw before, I don't want legacy equipment and encryption anymore. We need to get rid of that. I need a reinforced modernization plan, post-quantum communication, and quantum resilience. And the important pieces were this administration and the legislative branch both agreed, yes, we're going to put a time frame around this. And those time frames were, one, show me the money. That's always a good thing when the Office of Management and Budget says, we have skin in the game because you told us to, and we're putting funding against this. And then two, we see the NIST make a move forward to declare an actual post-quantum algorithm on 5 July, just in accordance with the timeline that those executive orders came up with. The next piece I think is important to look at is 3 different bills, one on the Senate and 2 on the House of Representatives going through, that have quantum language in them that will put funding and growth and technology development against getting us in the right place to recognize how critical this is going to be as this next, I would say, change in our computing infrastructure will be one of the largest we've ever seen. So I think we're catching up fast. We're putting a lot of people on it, and we're leaning into it correctly. the situation is it's not a race run by ourselves, Dave. It's quite frankly run against other nation states, and they are leaning into it fast, and they have not taken a break. Let's consider China's 14th five-year plan that specifically calls out the fourth informationization revolution. That's hard to say. Basically, the fourth IR, and their focus is that quantum core because they know how critical it is to get ahead of that. So we're not running this race alone. So we can't judge it just based on what we're doing. We need to judge it based on the technology advances we see globally.
Yeah, I know you and your colleagues are really at the front line here in terms of working with the federal government to provide some of these quantum solutions. I'm curious, is there a chance that we could have the equivalent of a Sputnik moment, where suddenly one of our adversaries, unexpected to us, surprises us with how far ahead they've gotten? Or might we put our own Sputnik moment out to the rest of the world?
That is a great reference, and it's one that I use. Think about the space race when Yuri Gagarin took a lap around the Earth, and all of us looked wide-eyed at it in the U.S. and said, man, we better get busy. That same thing could happen at any given time, and it's really hard to find out. For us looking at what we were thinking, let's consider we're back in that day. We had the telltale indicators of what was going on. And then once it became a newsworthy event and we saw Russia in space, we started catching up. The same thing will be true here, but it will be harder to find. And it could be a very devastating moment where something's released as an attack that we weren't ready for, or we see some things solved technologically that show the advances that other nation states have made that we haven't made. And then we have to come honest where we are in this race. Yeah, Dave, those things could happen in a moment. It's a little bit easier to see and study spacecraft on pads and infrastructure and logistics and some of the more mechanical, open, obvious things that happen in a space race or a nuclear race. In this race, a lot of the quantum world we're living in, first of all, it's pretty complicated. It's what Einstein called spooky action at a distance. So it's hard to understand just how far other technology has advanced. And then it's also hard to imagine just how much or how big a result could happen from a quantum advance from another nation if we're not ready for it or at least expecting it.
Are there questions that folks should be asking their financial institutions? Or, if I'm a small business owner, should I be working with my suppliers to make sure that they're on top of this? Or are we at the moment now where people need to be doing their own due diligence?
I think so. Just like anything, it pays to have insurance. So we have HIPAA regulations. We have personally identifiable information that we need to protect. We need to start asking those questions, especially at the broader, larger level, all the way down to high-end investors and other folks that are trying to make long-term investments. How are you protecting the information that you have on me so that we can continue to do good work together in the future? So that question just in and of itself says, are you prepared for the future? And making sure that the investment that I'm making in you or the investment you're making in me to protect my body so that I last a long time in healthcare, that you're ready to protect who I am and all the information around the business we do. So that means you have on your game plan, just like our nation does, you have a modernization plan. You have a plan for post-quantum communication and quantum resilience, i.e., I usually call that pre and post-quantum. I would like to have no heartbeats raised, no concern whatsoever before that quantum computer, the cryptographically relevant quantum computer comes out, and after that we already have a plan in place that keeps us steady, ensuring freedom and protection of information beforehand. Those are valid questions to ask, and they're usually followed up with how much is it going to cost? And that secondarily follows up with what does it cost if you lose this information? So you need to weigh those ahead of time. And then that's one of the reasons I really like what we're doing is we're providing and making every attempt to provide a backward compatibility for post-quantum comm. So the current infrastructure you have If we can put 60,000 quantum resilient keys over your current layer that isn't going to be broken by that quantum computer, then you get to keep doing exactly what you're doing without significant bandwidth or latency hits, and your information is protected now and then after.
Joe, what do you think?
Dave, I want to start by saying this. I am by no means an expert in quantum computing.
Is anybody?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Right.
If you read, one of my favorite books in the world is a book by Simon Singh called The Code Book. That's essentially a history of cryptography.
Okay.
It is a great book.
Yeah.
And it's really easy to understand right up until he starts talking about quantum cryptography.
Okay.
And that's where I go like, I have no idea what's going on here.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, and I kind of understand the high-level concepts of it. Like, for example, if you have something that is a problem like factoring large numbers, a quantum computer can solve that in, I think, one operation if it has enough bits in it. Whereas a traditional computer has to try everything between 0 and the square root of the number, or 1 or 2 and the square root of the number, right? So to see if it's a factor. And that takes a very, very, very long time because these numbers are very, very large. And because these numbers are very, very large, you're going to need to build a quantum computer that has a very large number capability, like a 496-bit quantum computer.
Right.
If you're thinking about our current architecture, we have 64 bits, and people are like, well, I mean, they can't build, if they can't build a 496-bit computer for our desktop, why would you build something like that for a quantum computer? But the thing about this is you're not talking about a production computer. You're not talking about a microcomputer. Think back to the days of UNIVAC, right? You're building something like that. So you only need to build one of these computers that has the capability of processing 496-bit numbers, right? Which is the large cryptography numbers.
Right. Next thing you know, you got the computer in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Right, exactly. Isn't that the Earth?
Yeah.
So I think the Y2K analogy is a good one. And I'll tell you why I think it's a good one. Because Peter de Jager made the announcement of the problem in 1993, right? Do you remember when we started panicking about Y2K? It's like 1998.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's when we started seeing all the jobs come out and go, we got to fix this problem. 5 years of doing nothing while this happened.
Right.
Knowing that full well that was coming. And I expect the same thing is going to happen here with quantum computing. There's no firm date either. So it's not going to be taken care of until the problem is upon us. It's going to be, like you were describing, the Sputnik moment.
Right.
And everybody's going to go, oh, holy crap, what's happened?
Right.
There will be some orgs that have prepared. And I think a lot of them are going to be in fintech. I think they're going to be the first ones on board, but most will not be prepared for this. I think there's my prediction.
Yeah, I agree. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I think human beings have proven ourselves a reactive species.
Yes. So this is my Jostradamus prediction.
Okay.
Not everybody is, most people will not be prepared for this. Most organizations will not be prepared for this.
Right.
Here is another problem about the dawn of quantum computing. Intercepting communication on the internet is actually pretty easy, right? And that's why we use cryptography. The assumption is that anybody is seeing your information go across the wire. So we've been encrypting our communications more and more, but for years now, governments around the world have been hoarding this information with the idea that in some time in the future, this encryption will be easy to break.
Right.
Right? Either due to Moore's Law or due to some revolutionary thing like quantum computing. And here we are. According to Pete, that will happen in the next 3 to 7 years. And all the information that has already been captured is just going to be decrypted.
Yeah.
And relatively quickly as well. There is something very interesting that came out. On July 5th, NIST published an article that said they have announced 4 algorithms that are quantum resistant. And they've been working on this for 6 years. So NIST has been out in front of this, which is great. I have a link. Can we put that in the show notes?
Sure.
Okay. So there's a link to the NIST article at NIST.gov about the 4 articles that are quantum resistant. So that's great news. If you're responsible for maintaining infrastructure at your company, this needs to be something that you're working on now. This is something that has to be taken into consideration now and needs to be brought to the forefront of what's going on, because soon all these communications will be vulnerable to cryptographic attacks or to quantum attacks on the cryptography. And your algorithms that you use to protect your communication with your customers needs to be protected against that.
Yeah, I mean, isn't it going to take sort of widespread adoption in things like our browsers to really make a difference?
They're going to have to be rolled out into browsers, going to have to be rolled out into web servers. I think that these algorithms are pretty modular, so that I don't know that that's a big problem.
Right.
It just needs to be done.
Yeah.
It needs to be done.
Well, I'm sure we'll get on top of it in the same way that we did with Y2K.
Right.
So.
Exactly. I'm not optimistic about this one, Dave.
Yeah. With good reason.
Yeah.
With good reason. All right. Well, our thanks to Pete Ford for joining us again. He's from Q Secure, and we appreciate him taking the time. That is our show. We want to thank all of you for listening. Thanks to the Johns Hopkins University Information Security Institute for their participation. You can learn more at isi.jhu.edu. The Hacking Humans podcast is proudly produced in Maryland at the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technologies. Our senior producer is Jennifer Iben. Our executive editor is Peter Kilpie. I'm Dave Bittner.
And I'm Joe Kerrigan.
Thanks for listening.